Weekend, everyone. Sure doesn't look like it's the beginning, well, unofficial beginning of summer out there. It's right about time to start the downpour. I usually dress all in black. Black and red are my favorite colors. I decided to switch things up since it's going to be crappy and rainy and awful for the next probably 3 days. So I said I'll dress in a little bit of retro 80s style, gray and white. It also helps to accentuate the slight, I guess it's not a sunburn, but I've been out in the sun a lot, cycling, running, so, you can see kind of my arms. I don't ever tan. I burn. I go from white to burned. There's no in between. Although yesterday when I got back from my run, I had a lot of, you ever get, when you're out in the sun, you get, actually, you're the first. Let's continue this conversation. When you're out in the sun, do you ever get the time that you get freckles from being in the sun too much? I get that every now and then. That's why I'm dressed in different colors instead of being in black. Also, a little behind the scenes, about 5 minutes before I went live, I was having a coughing fit from the wind is blowing pollen. It hasn't started raining yet. So I was gagging on pollen. I said, my eyes are all red. I'm going to look like I'm stoned, but I'm not. I was gagging on pollen. I hate pollen. How's everyone else's allergies doing out there? Has it been as bad for you as it's been for me? It was like it went from 0 to 1,000, like instantly. Where the pollen, like I have a white car, and good luck with keeping it clean. Even spraying it off with a hose every other day, it doesn't matter. Like I sprayed it off yesterday, and by the time the day ended, it was covered in crap again. C'est la vie. So yeah, this is Memorial Day weekend, and this is the 14th edition of the Without a Map, In My Footsteps podcast live stream, where we get together Fridays at 8, chat about the podcast, go a little bit in depth to the most recent episode, preview the next one, and I give little tidbits about the inner workings of it, and sometimes there's funny behind the scenes stories just of life in general. I have some visual aids next to me that may be used and shown. First off, though, I wanted to thank everyone that stopped by Monday for my book launch live stream. So what we did there was everyone got together for the release date of my 6th book, Iconic Hotels and Motels of Cape Cod, through Arcadia Publishing. And it was Monday at 7:30. I went over, a lot of went into making the book. COVID delayed it for a while, and now, even though COVID's about over, still it's not back to normal, where promoting this book has been slow. So I'm working on building up a lot of, we're doing Zoom events. My first one is going to be at the Centerville Library, June 25th. It's a Friday at 1 o'clock. Well, it's not going to be at the library. It's going to be sponsored by the library. And I'm going to do Zoom events. I've got 4 or 5 scheduled, and I've got another one that they're starting to roll in, and thankfully they're all Zoom, so I can just be like this and sit here and say, hey. If you're interested in the book, it's available at historypress.com. They're Arcadia's branch that this is published through, and Amazon, Barnes & Noble. Hi, Emma. My niece Emma just joined the chat. She's in here with my sister Ashley. I say these things to the names. Hey, it's Matt. What's going on? All right, let me pull this down. So, I do these every Friday. We start off with the most recent. Oh, now it's Cape. Boy, there's a lot of people coming in. This is awesome. You know why? It's because it's Memorial Day weekend, but it's crappy weather outside. So why not sit and join me and listen to me talk while my voice will go? I don't know if any of you noticed the last 2 live streams. Monday and last Friday, they were shorter than normal because the pollen, I have an open window over here to get air, and it blows pollen in, and within a half hour my voice was gone. So the last 2 live streams I had to cut short because it's like this, and I said it's not worth it. I'll just cut it short rather than sound like I'm dying here. But yeah, thank you for tuning in to this live stream, to any of the live streams. This started off as something, oh jeez, poor Kate. Cut it. Hiking. Where did you go hiking? Just out back in the backyard to the street behind you? The funny thing is that if I see people I know pop up that are in the live stream, I will shout them out just so they know I see them, and I'll do the little wave function. But after I finish this, I put it up on IGTV, YouTube, Twitter, Facebook, and you can't see chat. You can't see. So people watching this after, I'm just talking, and all of a sudden I stop. It's like a dog seeing a squirrel. I'm like, hey, how's it going? And there's nobody there. So this week was episode 22 of the podcast. So I got my visual aids here. If you can tell, this is so what it was a shorter bonus episode for Mental Health Awareness Month. And it's only about 24 minutes. I've explained it before, but basically I get a certain amount of minutes per month in my paid plan through Buzzsprout. And I had been doing 3 episodes and then skipping a week. And I started noticing I had extra minutes left over in my plan, and they don't roll over. So I started getting the idea maybe doing one topic in a shorter podcast. And so that's what I've been doing the last few months. And that's what this episode 22 with the... Hi, Mom. Now my mom has joined. So I'm in the middle of episode 22. Mental Health Awareness Month is this month. And so in this part of the podcast, I talk about some of the myths and facts about mental health, trying to get rid of some of the stigma that goes with it, especially for men when it comes to dealing with depression, anxiety, things like that. And naturally, to do that, I tie in my own dealings with depression over the years, hoping that if anyone listens to it and it helps one person kind of feel better about themselves or seek help if needed, then that's great. I don't mind sharing my own stuff. It's fine. And I also tie it into celebrity deaths, specifically Robin Williams and Chris Cornell, because when you talk about depression and celebrities, and it's like, I used to have the mindset when I was younger, like, how could someone be depressed that has fame and fortune and money? And it turns out depression doesn't care about that. So that's what episode 22 is. Obviously, you can find it anywhere you get your podcasts: Apple, Spotify, Pandora, Amazon. And I'm there. In My Footsteps podcast, you can't miss the logo. It's New England and Cape Cod centric. And speaking of that, so I had teased in my Instagram story that there could be a new segment of the podcast coming, and I did a poll on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and basically what I asked people, I said, if you've listened to the podcast, that was the caveat first, was what would you prefer? I have a segment called This Week in History where I usually go over 4 topics from the week, and I do something called a time capsule where I pick a year that corresponds with the week of the podcast, and I'll tell you about the number 1 song, movie, TV show, and find some sort of product that was available then or big then and give you the price compared to now. It's a neat little time capsule. Literally, that's why I called it that. But I found myself constantly the last few weeks of the podcast saying, even if you don't like history, I think you'll like this. And so it started getting in my head, like, if I'm having to kind of not bribe people to, listen to the history part, if I'm having to always say, you'll like history, you might like history, I started thinking maybe I should change things up. And I got an idea for top 5 lists. They'll be similar in vein, but I put it to a vote. I said, would you like the This Week in History segments as is, or would you prefer I cut down This Week in History to maybe one story, keep the time capsule, and do a top 5 list? And it was overwhelming that people wanted, it was like 80% wanted the top 5 lists. So starting, I think it's episode 24 or 25 is next month. I'm going to do top 5 lists. I already have at least 60 top 5 lists ready. And I don't want to spoil it, but literally think of anything you would want to make a top 5 list of. And that's kind of where my mind went. I thought of all the stuff. I mean, it's going to be crappy and rainy for Memorial Day. So think of top 5 worst storms you've been through in your life. That could be a list. I won't tease too much because the first top 5 list I'm going to do on the podcast is going to be top 5 Cape Cod icons. I may rephrase that, where icons, I think people get the idea that it might be people. So I got to figure a way. I'm thinking if you've never been to Cape Cod ever in your life, these are the 5 things you need to see first. And so that's where it kind of goes from. They're going to be in no particular order. There'll be enough discussion. I've learned with my books, when I have a certain amount of restaurants, nightclubs, hotels in it, that it's always going to be, yes, iconic places to visit. That'll be good. I mean, one example is going to be the Cape Cod National Seashore. So if you've never been to Cape Cod, you go to the seashore. Like that. And so I'm hoping that will help ease it, where if people, my podcast is listed in most places as the genre is like travel or travel and history. And I was thinking that if I pull back a little more history and add more in the way of lifestyle such, I can change the genre and maybe bring in more eyes. It's all a matter of tweaking the podcast to get the most eyes on it. I've been doing it for 6 months now, so I'm constantly tweaking to see what works and what doesn't work, and I'm always trying to get feedback. That sometimes, a lot of the time, is like pulling teeth with people, and you can't force people to give you feedback about the podcast. So it's kind of like hard for me to figure out what works. But I will say I have noticed that my 2 most downloaded episodes have titles that are not necessarily clickbait, but the title is interesting enough that I think that's drawing people in. One is Cape Cod's Lost Lighthouse, and one is Cape Cod's Atlantis. And that's episode 2 and episode 5. And I noticed that. I said, boy, the people see that title and they're like, ooh, that's interesting. So I'm thinking of, doing, episode 25, top 5 Cape Cod icons. People see that, boom. It's not necessarily clickbait, but it's a way to get more, people to check it out. And speaking of titles that are going to bring people in, that brings me to episode 23 coming next week. we are going to start with discussion of one of the biggest, yes, basically it's buzzword. It is. It's search engine optimization, SEO. I would think that top 5 would naturally get people there. Cape Cod icons, things like that. People look for Cape Cod, but like that. So episode 23, we're starting off with one of the most beloved, well-known restaurants ever on Cape Cod, and that's Mildred's Chowder House. Anyone that visited the Cape, lived on the Cape from the 60s through the 90s, either went to Mildred's, knew about Mildred's, and the interesting thing is that their slogan was the home of Cape Cod clam chowder. And so that's going to be episode 23. It's going to be right there. Episode 23, the home of Cape Cod clam chowder. So, well, no, Mildred's Chowder House has been closed for almost 25 years, so you will not have a chance to go. 60s through the 90s, it was just huge. And so I'll go over that and their famous chowder. Then we're going to do a road trip to one of my favorite places in New England, Narragansett, Rhode Island. That is a crown jewel of New England. I love it down there. Anyone that's never been to Narragansett, you've got to check out. So there's a few places that I would recommend. I point to Point Judith Lighthouse, which is partially covered by my photo. But that is at literally Point Judith is the name of the spot. There's Crazy Burger, which was a restaurant featured on Diners, Drive-Ins, and Dives many years ago, probably 2010 or 11. So you'd have to go check the archives, but they're on there. Crazy Burger is awesome. They at least used to make their own ketchup. So they'd bring you Heinz, but they'd also bring you this little plastic squeeze bottle that was their homemade one. And one time I went, I actually bought some. And they gave me a plastic squeeze bottle, and it had like a paper towel kind of over the top, and it was a rubber band around that, and then it was screwed shut. And I got to take that home, and that was pretty neat. There's also a lot of historic homes, a lot of beaches. It's the departure spot to go to Block Island. It's one of them where you can go check out Block Island from Narragansett. So that's going to be in episode 23. And as I've progressed in the podcast, like I said, I've been adding more lifestyle topics and retro topics because I think those are more universal. And I don't mind, making fun of myself when it comes to these sorts of things. So on episode 23, I'm going to talk about first crushes, which is sure to be filled with laughs. I had fun recording it. I stuck to the 80s. So when the 80s ended, I was 12 years old. So we're sticking to, I make the joke that it's the sweet and innocent puppy love type crushes and not the rotten stuff that, it can get bad as you get older. This is before you know better. I'm not jaded, so. But yeah. So we're going to talk about that. I don't name names as far as crushes go, and the reason being, all of the people that I talk about in the podcast are all my friends on Facebook. So if they can figure out who it is, that's fine. But I'm not going to name names. Coming up later next month, once I figure out how much extra free time I have with my minutes with my podcast, the next bonus episode is sure to be one that everyone from the Cape will love, and that's the history of the Cape Cod Coliseum. So it wasn't open that long. When I went to it, I was 5 years old to see Sesame Street on ice. So that'll kind of date how old I am. But there's a lot. Cape Cod Coliseum, for the time it was open from, I think it was 1972 to 1984. From that time, it was huge. Everyone played there. Legit. I'm talking Grateful Dead, Kiss, Van Halen, Ozzy Osbourne, and they had the Cape Cod Cubs hockey team. They had WWF wrestling. And the funny thing is, the Coliseum building, it's still standing. It's a big concrete structure, but so the Coliseum's been closed for 35 years at least, if you drive past it. So the Cape Cod Coliseum is on White's Path in South Yarmouth, and it's Supply New England warehouse now. But if you drive past it, the facade that faces the road, you can still see the outline of the letters Cape Cod Coliseum. I'll have to try to get an up-close photo, because you can see it. You can make out Cape Cod Coliseum on the side of it. And it's over 35 years since those letters got taken down. So they're really ingrained in there. It's interesting. The Coliseum is a fascinating story about how something got so big, so fast, and then just was gone. And we still have the Cape Cod Melody tent down here as far as the big entertainment spot on Cape Cod. But when the Coliseum was open, it topped the Melody tent. It was everyone. And I'm going to make sure on that episode of the podcast, I'll give links, I'll give lists, because they have links to all of the bands that ever played there. So think of any big band in the 70s, early 80s. They all played there. It's wild, because I didn't realize growing up that all these bands came down to Cape Cod and actually played here. Because growing up on Cape Cod, you see it as, like, especially in the wintertime, there's nothing going on, especially in the 80s and 90s. So you think of it as, ooh, it's like a dead zone. Why would famous bands come here? And then you see the set lists from the Coliseum, and it's like everyone did. So that's going to be a fun topic to cover. I'm sure that'll get a lot of hits. But it was one thing where I couldn't condense the Cape Cod Coliseum into a segment on a regular podcast. It needed its own podcast to let it breathe more. So that's going to be coming in June. And like I said at the top of the podcast, I'm starting to put together Zoom events for my new book. So I've got my copy of the book here. I showed it on the screen. But obviously, like I said, you can pick it up at Barnes & Noble. Any of the local bookstores have it. That's a guarantee. But Amazon and Arcadia Publishing, they all have copies of it. And so, I'll be talking about that. I've never done Zoom events. I'm assuming it's going to be sort of like my regular events that I've done over the years, where I have a PowerPoint presentation, but I'm assuming that I would just share the screen and just click through it. It'll probably be easier because I'll just be hidden. It'll be kind of like what I've done here, where it'll be like a photo and I'll just be hidden away so I can talk and do whatever. Not that I don't mind being up in front of people, but sometimes it's easier when there's a distraction, so that they're not all just staring at you, waiting for you to mess up. Although I don't think they do that when they come see me, but who knows? So I know I've got the Centerville Library. I'm doing one through. I've been in touch with the Falmouth Library today, and they want me to do at least 2, maybe 3 events for Zoom. It was funny. They reached out to me and said, would you mind doing Zoom events for your 2 books? And I said, which 2? I was like, I have 6. So they didn't even, I was like, you didn't do your research well. It's like I have 6, including a new one that just came out. Now they want me to do like a video oral history. Like they're going to talk to me like I'm some old timer sitting in a rocking chair on a porch about back in my day. I told them, I said, I'll talk about stuff with Cape Cod, but I'm hardly an expert. So we'll see. We'll see what happens with that, with the oral history. When I hear that, I think of people that are in their 80s that, grew up in the Depression and are like, back when I was young, the Cape, there was no highway, there was no this and that. Me, I'm like, when I was young, it was all still the same. So, but it'll still be fun. And obviously, Memorial Day weekend is here. It's the start of the summer. I appreciate everyone that's tuned in because this is normally, I guess, an unofficial start of summer, but that's not really feeling it right now. But hopefully the rain washes away the pollen. So once this live stream is done, it's going to, like I said, go up on IGTV. It's going to go on YouTube with chapters, which makes it a little easier because I try to keep things on track, but obviously I divert all over the place, so I can kind of put things together and so people can mouse over it and there's a chapter, it'll say Cape Cod Coliseum. They can click the chapter and just listen to that. Because if you were to tune in after the fact, and here I am just monologuing, it would kind of be like, what's he talking about? And as I've said, you can find me. The podcast is everywhere you get it. Apple, Spotify, Pandora, Amazon. My favorite beach on the Cape? Boy, that's a good one. I'm trying to think of where to go. So honestly, I like, when it comes to summertime, I think of beach in summer. I like to go to places where you can be out in the nice weather, but be away from people. Because if you go to the most popular beaches on the Cape, we're talking Craigville Beach, Nauset Beach, West Dennis Beach, Sandy Neck Beach. If you go to those, it's just crush of people. And so I would say I love Great Island Beach. That's in Wellfleet, and I'll tell you why. So this was probably 6 years ago, 4th of July weekend. I was with my girlfriend at the time, and we were looking for a beach we could just go and hang out at. And it's like, well, there's thousands of people down here, so how are we going to find a place that's out of the way? And we just drove way out. So it's on the bay side in Wellfleet. And there's Great Island. There's a parking area up on a hill, and you've got to walk down the road to the beach. But we went there July 4th weekend. There might have been 10 other people on the beach. And it was like, wow, there's nobody here. And we had the whole beach to ourselves. And there's hardly any cell phone service and such. So Great Island is a great one. Bound Brook Island Beach, which is not too far from Great Island. It's also on the bay side. That one, I would not recommend going to Bound Brook Island unless you have an SUV or a truck or something, because it's a mile drive down a very uneven dirt road. And I mean, I made it down there I have a Toyota Corolla. It's pretty low to the ground. I made it down there in that. I wouldn't recommend it because I wouldn't want someone to go out there with me saying, oh yeah, you can make it, of course. And then you get stuck and then it's my fault. I sent you out there. So Bound Brook Island has awesome sunsets. That's my favorite sunset spot on the Cape. You get there, there's a couple hundred yards of walking over dunes, it's a pathway. You're not destroying the dunes. But as you're walking and facing the water, to your right is a hill. It's not a sand dune. It's more just like a big hill, 60, 70 feet up. If you scale that and take photos from there, it's unbelievable. I've gone up there and just sat on that hill by myself, just watched the sunset. You're in the middle of nowhere. Only thing I can tell you is if you go there, don't lock your keys in the car, because that actually happened to me where I had locked the car and the car was locked. I sat on the seat. The keys fell out of my pocket. So when I shut the door was locked. I shut it and the keys were on the seat. And I remember my girlfriend was running to the dunes to go to the beach, and she turned and looked and she said, "What are you doing?" I said, "Oh, nothing, just locking the keys in the car." And she thought I was kidding, but oh no. We had to call AAA to come out the dirt road and unlock my car. It took them at least an hour to get there because they probably were like, "What the hell are you doing out here?" But they came out and helped me. It just shows you that AAA will help you wherever you go. Oh man. But those are two of my favorites. I would say, Nauset Beach is great if you have an off-road vehicle, because you can drive away from where everyone is. Same with Sandy Neck Beach. Same with Crow's Pasture in Dennis. You can drive out and kind of have space. If you go to the crowded beaches, Craigville, West Dennis Beach, it's like you're just on top of everyone, and it's fun, but it's not fun, because it's like if I wanted to be packed like sardines in a tin, I'd just stand in an elevator all day. That's from years and years of living and growing up on Cape Cod. You learn in the summer where to go so that you're still out and having fun, but you're not where all the tourists go. Because there are certain spots that if you come down and you're a tourist, you know of certain places. Like I could tell tourists, I'd ask them, "Where's your favorite beach?" They'd probably name Craigville, West Dennis, Sandy Neck, Nauset. That's when you find below the secret ones. Like Race Point. Race Point Beach, that's a good one. You just gotta enjoy hiking over the dunes to get to it. I've done sunrises out there that are mind-blowing, but it's a 1.5 mile walk through the sand. So you have to really want to do it, or else you're going to hate the whole time you're out there. But, so coming up on Monday, Kate's out of the chat now. So I got this as a present for my niece Kaleigh for her birthday. My oldest niece turns 22 years old on Monday. Emma's in the chat. I'm not going to show you, though, unless your mom told you. So I bought her something. I'm not going to show you. But I know she'll like it. I went to Provincetown. I'm taking pictures for the next book I'm working on. I don't want to say too much because I'm in the process of getting the contracts. And so I don't want to jinx it. But I was up there taking pictures, some street life and such. And I was standing in front of this store. And I saw something that I thought my niece might like. So I'm texting my sister, asking her about it, but she was driving. So I had to wait and wait and wait. And I'm just standing in front of this store, and I said, "God, I must look sketchy." But she finally got back to me. So that's Kaleigh's birthday. Hopefully I'll see her and get to give that to her, because she's now at the age where she's not at home all the time. So we'll see. And you can find me on Twitter. I have a podcast page on Facebook, which I set up. I'm in a podcast group on Facebook that's 22,000 members. And I'm one of the most active, which I thought was funny. I must just never shut up. But I have a podcast page that you can like and become a fan of. And I did it because on Facebook, especially, I'm only friends with people I know in real life. And I get tons of requests that people must hear the podcast and see me on Facebook. And I feel bad. I have to say, follow my podcast page. That's kind of what it's there for. So if you want to go follow over there, find me on Twitter. I'll share a lot of photos from Instagram over there too. And obviously here, I was doing TikTok. I'm already bored of it. It's something where I was doing 60-second history kind of videos, 4K. I would shoot a spot 4K video and share what it was. But it's like extra work not to get much in the way of marketing the podcast. That was kind of why I did it. Marketing the podcast. Otherwise, it's like I'm not interested in that. I don't know if anyone else out there that has done TikTok for business, marketing, if you've had success. Me, I was kind of like, I did it because it's blowing up and it's very popular. I'm not stupid, but I'm also like, God, this is a lot of extra work for not a lot of reward. So that's kind of on the back burner. I'm also on YouTube. I do 4K New England videos. The most recent one that I have is Cape Cod's Loneliest Grave, which is a spot in Truro. I don't think I have a photo of it I can pull up to show you. So that'll be kind of unfortunate. Oh, thank you so much, Fox Life. I really appreciate that. I try to make the live streams interesting too, where it's not just me talking about the podcast. I don't want it to be where you come to this live stream and you think essentially you've got to either hear me talk for the whole time about the podcast, or so I try to make it where obviously I want you to go listen to the podcast and see if you enjoy it, but I also like to add in other stuff. I usually tell embarrassing stories and funny stories because I don't mind embarrassing myself, whatever. I started making audio, like radio shows, when I was 12 years old. That's where I think it's kind of full circle. A podcast is like a mature version of what I used to do. When I was 12, I had, I guess it was a boombox, a little mini cassette recorder. And I had a couple of buddies of mine, and we did skits, we did commercials, and it was just fun stuff. And we did it for a couple of years. I like the creativity. I think that's what I like about the podcast too, is the creativity that I had back then kind of translates, but I'm always tweaking it. When I was doing those radio shows when I was a teenager and the videos with my camcorder, I did what I liked and whatever. If you don't like it, who cares? With the podcast, I'm trying to get it where it's more accessible to everyone. So that's why I'm tweaking it. That's why I'm putting the top 5 lists in, starting in, I think it's episode 24. And so we'll see from there. May was my top month thus far in the podcast. Best month for downloads, best week, and best single day. So I think I'm starting to gain traction. And the biggest thing I've learned in my research of podcasts and such is have a lot of material. Whatever you're passionate about that you're doing the podcast on, make sure you've got more than like 2 episodes worth of stuff, because you need patience to let your audience grow. Very, very few podcasters can start up and immediately get 1,000 downloads an episode. Very few. It's usually way on the other end. And that's when the people get discouraged. Because, like, I put a lot of heart and soul and effort into all of the episodes, researching, recording, editing, marketing. And so it's easy to get discouraged if you're doing that and not seeing the downloads, not getting feedback, because you'll start to say, why am I doing all this if I'm not getting the results I want? And I've heard from several podcasters that I listen to, that I interact with, that say it took them a couple of years. Absolutely. Shout out to Cameron. Hopefully you're enjoying Memorial Day weekend. Hopefully where you are, it's not rainy and terrible, but there's an open window right there and I can hear that it's raining because cars are driving by and I hear the splashing tires. I had to get out and I did a run today and yesterday because I knew the next 3 days were going to be just awful. So I'll end on some fun stuff. So my new book is dedicated to my 6 nieces and nephews. I have a nice 6-pack. Not a real one, but 3 nieces, 3 nephews. And it's dedicated to them. I have 6 books, so it kind of works. And as I don't mind getting older because I have, these kids that are just, they make it not as bad. I hope Emma's still in the chat so she knows. I always say Emma is the brains that I wish I had if I had actually really applied myself 25 years ago when I graduated high school. That's right. 25 years ago next week. Oh my God. Yeah. So I enjoy getting to spend time with them. As they get older, it's like I was when I was growing up. You have less time. You want to be with your friends. I didn't see my aunts and uncles that much when I got out of my teens. And then when I got older, now I interact with them more. It's like it kind of comes back around. It's like when things in the 50s became cool again, or now things from the 80s are becoming cool again. It's like your crazy uncle becomes cool again. So but I'm lucky that I have my youngest niece, Sylvie, who's my little buddy, and she made me some little cards just for me. This was Fresca. And then she had some that were bugs, and she gave these to me, and I kept them all. Wait, it's written there. And so it comes back around to the mental health awareness episode of the podcast. Find things that make you happy in the days. I mean, COVID hopefully is about over. The mask mandate is ending tomorrow, so hopefully things will get back to normal. But it's been a terrible 15 months, and I'm sure a lot of people went through bouts of depression. I did. I don't like sitting on my ass and working a job out of necessity that was a toxic, terrible work environment, but you do it because you don't know what tomorrow brings. So this all comes around to little Sylvie became one of my favorite parts of life because it made me feel like the world wasn't so bad. And so now my days when I go and visit her, I am the fun uncle that always wants to have a good time, even if that means that I disobey orders from people that are trying to keep her out of trouble. I'll just say that. Basically, she looks at me and says, I got you wrapped around right here. So I'll show you. Basically, we were blowing bubbles yesterday. And I wanted to share that because when she gets older, maybe she'll see these, maybe she won't. But at least she'll know that her uncle really loved spending time with her and such. You never know what tomorrow might bring. So it's always important to find those things that make you happy and hang on to them. And that's kind of what I wanted to end with, is just that bit there. And hopefully You have a great Memorial Day weekend. The weather's going to be terrible, so I hate to be a shameless self-promoter, but there's lots of time to listen to episodes of the podcast wherever you get it. Each episode is no more than, 50 minutes long, and it's broken up into segments. So it's not like this live stream where I just go. I record in segments and I stitch it together like a quilt, basically. And so you might enjoy one, you might enjoy none, but usually I say they're like potato chips. Usually people listen to one and then I see all these downloads and I'm like, there we go. I hooked in another one. And if you listen to them and you like them, let me know. DM me through here. Email me. It's all good because I'm always looking for feedback. Now I'm going to be doing the top fives. So if people, as we go, have ideas for top fives, send them on over. So have a great Memorial Day weekend. I'll be back next Friday. Episode 23 will be coming out Thursday. Remember, Mildred's Chowder House. And then we'll come back and we will join, next week. We will reconvene. So I really appreciate you tuning in to number 14, Without a Map live stream for the In My Footsteps podcast. Oh, hi to the Hole-in-One. So anyone that sees this after, I'm about to sign off, but the Hole-in-One Bakery Donut Shop. Oh, I got to give a couple minutes to them. Eastham and Orleans. So my grandfather owned a donut shop, Sullivan's Donut Shop, and they make donuts just like he did, the right way. The nice, filling ones that, they're great. I got to go there once and watch the four sisters that own it make the donuts. And it was awesome. It was like watching my grandpa make them again. And they made a fresh dozen, put them in a box, and autographed the box to my grandfather, and I brought them to him. And the funny part was, they bought a lot of his equipment when he closed the donut shop. So it's like part of the donut shop still lives. And the funny part is, they made these fresh donuts and signed the box for him. I went right over and brought him to him, and he literally, I think he had one, and the other 11, he's like, here, take them. And I'm like, but they made them for you. He's like, yeah, but I'm not going to eat them all. And I'm like, so you know where they went, right in my stomach. So they're in the chat. When you see this later on IGTV and YouTube, you won't know that they popped up in the chat, but go and check them out. Hole-in-One Bakery, Donut Shop, Restaurant, Eastham, Orleans. See, I shout out businesses on my podcast, and it's nice. It's always good when they come to me. So that was great. It was great to see you pop in, and thank you again to everyone for stopping by for the Without a Map live stream. Enjoy Memorial Day weekend, and I will see you again next week. And that's it. Have a great weekend.